Hey, lovely humans, and welcome back. If this is your first time tuning in, my name is Dana Strickland. I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of Arizona, a certified clinical trauma professional or CCTP, and an IMDRIA certified therapist. Thanks for tuning into this mini-series. Last time we covered the neurophysiological response to stress, i.e. fight, flight, or freeze. And in this episode, we'll define trauma and talk about what complicates it before moving on to discuss the adaptive information processing or AIP model, which is the foundation of EMDR. Finally, we'll end on some resourcing or grounding activities that you can use to help yourself and your clients. Let's get rolling. So, what is trauma? Well, I'm glad you asked. The working definition of trauma used by researchers states anything that interrupts or interferes with normal social, emotional, psychological, cognitive, language, or physical developmental processes can be considered traumatic. Side note, I do not enjoy the word normal. Bessel van der Kolk describes trauma as the subjective experience of being overwhelmed. EMDR uses this definition as part of the adaptive information processing or AIP model. Trauma is subjective, meaning that it's different for everyone depending on their age, stage of development, and their history. What might be overwhelming to a 5-year-old is not necessarily overwhelming to a teenager. What's overwhelming to a teenager is not necessarily overwhelming to a middle-aged adult, so on and so forth. A traumatic experience includes a strong sense of fear, inability to cope, an unsafe level of vulnerability, and helplessness to protect yourself or to influence the situation in a way that protects you or your loved ones. Traumatic events, when maladaptively stored, are likely to interfere with our relationships and fundamental beliefs about who we are, about our place in the world, significant relationships in our lives, our concept of a higher power, and the meaning that we attribute to certain actions and behaviors. Hallmarks of a trauma reaction are fight, which does not always look like clocking someone in the jaw, UFC-style fighting, or Jerry Springer. Don't know if that's still on. Probably. I digress. Fight is a response where we move toward the stressor. Flight, we're moving away. Freeze is the experience of being stuck. This is not a catatonic state or mannequin frozen. You can be frozen and still breathing and kind of functioning in your body. If you've ever had that experience where you internally are screaming at yourself to say something or to move or to fight, to do something, anything other than just be there, that's a freeze reaction. And other hallmarks of a traumatic event are also dissociative experiences, which is the 1-2 combination punch of fight, flight, and freeze. So what makes trauma worse? What makes it not just a traumatic event, but maybe acute stress or post-traumatic stress? So if the traumatic events, especially events that are similar in nature, happen more than once or several times, that will make it worse. If the events are interpersonal, meaning done by someone to someone. If the events are intentional rather than accidental. If we have a history of generational trauma and social factors. So if our experience of the world prior to the traumatic event has left us with the belief that the world is unsafe or a dangerous place or that people can't be trusted, we're more likely to be traumatized by repeated overwhelming experiences. So what else influences how we store and process those experiences? Our age and stage of development at the time of the event, the presence of responsive and sensitive caretakers as children, or as adults, the presence of responsive and sensitive sources of support in our lives. Our cultural beliefs, spiritual and religious beliefs, internal resources such as our natural or learned coping skills, resilience, beliefs about ourselves, so on and so forth. Studies show that consistent patterns of emotional avoidance, as opposed to emotional regulation and conflict management, actually increase the frequency, intensity, and duration of our fight, flight, freeze, and dissociative responses. So what helps us heal? Getting enough sleep, having balanced schedules, disconnecting from electronics and other means of checking out, spending time with people who we can be ourselves with, practicing mindfulness, meaning being fully present and aware in the moment that we are currently existing in, observing and describing non-judgmentally, fully participating. Yoga, trauma releasing exercises or TRE, and EMDR. So thanks again for tuning in. So we've just covered what is trauma, what makes it worse. And next up, we're going to be talking about the Adaptive Information Processing Model, or AIP, which is the foundation of EMDR. Thanks, y'all.